The iron castle of the vampires had been closed to humans for almost 100 years when the impossible happened. Its black gates groaned open in the middle of a stormy night, as if some old magic had been called by force. Inside the grand throne hall, under tall pillars and flickering blue fire, the vampire king sat on his dark throne, reading an ancient scroll, while his nobles whispered, plotted, and watched each other with cold, hungry eyes. His name was King Kaelith, an old and feared ruler with pale skin like moonlight, long dark hair falling over his shoulders and eyes the color of dying embers. His presence alone kept the entire hall silent. No one laughed loudly in front of him, no one argued without permission. Then, suddenly, the heavy doors at the far end of the hall slammed against the walls as a small figure stumbled inside. A little boy, soaked in rain, bare feet cut and bleeding, clothes torn, ran across the cold stone floor, his chest heaving, his face streaked with tears and mud. For one shocking moment, everyone simply stared. A human child here. Then the hall exploded with sound. "Guards, stop him!" one vampire hissed. "A human in the heart of our citadel? Kill him before others follow." Another noble rose from his seat, fangs bared in anger and fear. But the boy did not stop. He ran straight toward the throne as if he had not heard their threats, his small legs shaking but still moving forward. He fell to his knees at the bottom of the steps leading to Kaelith's throne, his fingers gripping the cold stone. "Please," he sobbed, trying to catch his breath. "Please, they're hurting my mom." "You have to help her." "They're hurting my mom." The sound of his breaking voice cut through the chaos like a blade. The nobles shouted louder, some demanding his death, others calling him bait, a trap, a foolish risk. One of Kaelith's commanders, a tall vampire with scars down his face, stepped forward, hand outstretched toward the child. "Your Majesty, allow me. I will remove this problem." But King Kaelith slowly raised one hand without even looking at him. The gesture was small, but it was enough. The guards froze. The hall, once full of noise, fell into a cold, trembling silence. Kaelith's deep voice, calm but full of authority, echoed in the chamber. "No one touches the boy." He leaned forward just slightly, studying the child. The boy was tiny, maybe 7 or 8 years old, heart beating so fast that even the humans in the hall could almost hear it. Still, despite his fear, he lifted his face and met the eyes of the vampire king. It was a brave, desperate gaze. "You came here alone, human," Kaelith said quietly. "Why?" The boy swallowed hard. "My name is Eli," he whispered. "They took my mom. Men with strange armor and chains that glow. Everyone in the village said you're a monster. But my mom said you keep your promises. She said if I was ever in real danger I should come to you because you owe her." A sharp murmur went through the vampire court. A human claiming the king owed someone a favor? Unthinkable. Some nobles laughed bitterly. Others hissed at the insult. "Lies?" one lady vampire said coldly. "No human is owed anything from the king." Kaelith's eyes narrowed, a faint line appearing between his brows. There was something in the boy's words that pulled on a memory buried deep under centuries of wars, betrayals and loneliness. "Your mother's name," he said, his voice turning suddenly hard. "What is your mother's name, child?" Eli hesitated for a moment, as if even speaking her name in this place might bring more danger. But he lifted his chin and answered, voice shaking but clear. "Her name is Myra of Hollowbrook." The scroll slipped from Kaelith's hand and fell silently to the floor. The sound of it hitting the stone echoed louder in his chest than in the hall. Myra. For a second, the king did not move. His immortal heart, which had not felt truly alive for many long years, seemed to twist painfully in his chest. A flash of memory rose before his eyes, a burning battlefield. Poisoned arrows in his body, a human woman kneeling beside him with trembling hands, using everything she had to save a creature everyone told her to fear. That woman had looked him in the eyes and made him swear something with blood and old magic. He had not heard her name spoken out loud in decades, but now here it was again, carried on the lips of a crying child. "It cannot be," one elder vampire whispered. "That human should be dead by now." Another noble shook his head. "This must be a trick. Inquisitors, hunters, someone is using old stories to make the king weak." Commander Rovan, the scarred vampire who had wanted to grab the boy, stepped forward again. "My king, allow me to remove this child and investigate the claim. Whether he lies or not, your presence is not required for such games." Kaelith slowly stood from his throne, the long, dark cloak trailing behind him like a piece of the night itself. His eyes never left Eli. "Everyone leave," he said quietly. It was not a shout, yet the walls themselves seemed to respond. "But my lord," a noble began. Now, this time his tone was sharp as steel. One by one, the nobles, guards, and courtiers filed out of the great hall. Some bowed in anger, some in confusion, some in fear. Commander Rovan was the last to leave, giving the boy a final suspicious look before the massive doors swung shut. Leaving Eli alone with the vampire king in the echoing hall, Kaelith descended the steps slowly, each footstep echoing. Up close, Eli looked even smaller. The boy tried to stand, but his legs trembled too hard, so he stayed on his knees, staring up at the towering figure. "You said your mother told you I owed her," Kaelith said. "Tell me everything." Eli took a shaky breath. "When I was little, she used to tell me stories," he began. "Stories about a night when monsters and men were killing each other. She said there was a man lying in the mud, dying, and everyone around her said to leave him, because he was one of the creatures from the dark forest. But she couldn't. She said his eyes looked tired and alone, not evil. She stayed, even when the others ran. She gave him her blood to keep him alive, and she made him promise that if her family was ever in danger, he would protect them. She said it was a blood oath. A real one. With magic." His voice broke. "No one believed her, but I did. When the men came 3 nights ago, they wore armor with a red burning sign on their chest. They had chains that glowed and hurt anyone who touched them. They were looking for something or someone, and when they dragged my mom away, she shouted at me to run to the dark forest to find you. She said, 'The king of the night owes me, Eli. He will help you.' He has to, so I ran. I ran until I couldn't feel my feet. And I pushed your gates, and they opened, and now I'm here. Please don't let them kill her." Kaelith listened in silence, his face unreadable, but inside him the old magic was already stirring. A blood oath was not a simple promise. It was a binding, living thing, tied to his power and to the life of the one who made it. If the boy spoke the truth, his very soul would be feeling the pull. "Come," he said at last, his voice softer now. He turned and walked toward a smaller side chamber, and after a brief hesitation, Eli scrambled to his feet and followed, limping from the cuts on his bare solace. The chamber they entered was round, lit by cold blue flames that never seemed to burn out. Symbols and runes were carved into the walls and floor, marks from a time when magic was written instead of spoken. Kaelith moved to a stone table and opened a small chest, taking out a silver bowl and a black dagger. Eli froze at the sight of the blade. Are you going to hurt me?" he whispered. The king looked at him with something almost like sadness. "If your mother is who you say she is, I would sooner burn this kingdom to the ground than harm you," he said quietly. "But the old magic requires proof. Give me your hand." Eli's hand shook as he held it out. Kaelith took it gently, surprising the child with how careful his cold fingers were. He made only the smallest cut on Eli's palm, just enough for a few drops of blood to fall into the bowl. Then, without hesitation, he cut his own palm and let a few drops of his dark blood fall beside the boy's. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the blood in the bowl began to glow, first softly, then brighter and brighter, until the whole room was filled with red light. Eli gasped and stumbled back, shielding his eyes. Kaelith stood very still as the power of the oath crashed into him like a wave of fire and ice. Ancient words he had spoken long ago echoed inside his mind. Blood to blood, life for life. I will protect your line as you protected mine. The glow slowly faded, leaving the bowl still as if nothing had happened. But Kaelith's expression had changed. His jaw was tight, and his eyes looked almost human for a moment, full of pain and anger. "It's real," he murmured. "Myra. You really did it." Eli stared at him, his heart beating fast. "So you will help her?" Kaelith turned his gaze fully on the boy. "I do not have a choice," he said. "The blood oath binds me. If your mother suffers, it pulls at my power. If she dies because I ignored her, the magic will punish me and this entire citadel. The old wards that hide us from the human world might even fall." Eli's eyes filled with fresh tears, but this time there was a flicker of hope inside them. "Then we have to go now," he said. "Please." They kept saying they would use her to drag the king into the light and finish what they started. I think they meant you." Kaelith nodded slowly. He had lived long enough to know a trap when he saw one, but he had also lived long enough to know that some promises could not be broken. "Gather your strength, Eli," he said, moving toward the door, his voice now carrying the full weight of a king. "Tonight, the Vampire King will walk into the human world again, not for war, not for blood, but for a woman who once saved his life, and for the son who was brave enough to remind him what honor means." Asterisk night had fully settled over the dark forest when King Kaelith and Eli stepped out of the citadel's protective shadows, beginning the dangerous journey toward the human lands where Myra was being held captive. The air outside was colder than the halls of the castle, sharp enough to sting Eli's cheeks, but the boy walked close to Kaelith, his small hand clutching the edge of the king's cloak to keep from falling behind. Kaelith did not shake him off. In fact, he slowed his long strides just enough for the boy to keep pace, an action that would have shocked every vampire noble if they had witnessed it. For centuries, Kaelith had walked these woods alone, feared by every creature of the night. But now, for the first time in decades, someone walked beside him, not a warrior, not a general, but a trembling human child whose heart beat like fluttering wings. As they moved deeper into the forest, the ancient trees seemed to bend overhead, their twisted branches forming dark arches above the path. Strange sounds echoed in the distance, growls, whispers, the rustle of unseen creatures watching. Eli's breath trembled, and Kaelith glanced down. "Stay close," he said quietly. "The forest respects me, but it does not trust you." Eli nodded quickly, trying to be brave. After an hour of walking, Kaelith stopped suddenly, one hand rising in warning. The wind shifted, carrying a scent only a vampire could detect. Eli froze. "What's wrong?" he whispered. Kaelith's eyes glowed faintly. "Something follows us." Before Eli could ask anything more, 3 massive shapes emerged from the shadows. They looked like wolves, but their bodies were too large, their fur too dark, their glowing yellow eyes watching with ancient intelligence. Eli clutched Kaelith's cloak tighter. The largest Volf stepped forward and let out a low, rumbling growl. Instead of fear, Kaelith's expression remained calm. He raised his hand, speaking in a deep, old language that vibrated the air itself. The wolves stopped their advance, heads lowering in acknowledgement. The leader sniffed the air and then turned its gaze toward Eli. "Do not run," Kaelith said softly. "They are deciding whether you are prey or under my protection." Eli's entire body shook, but he stayed still as the enormous creature leaned in, its hot breath washing over his face. After a tense moment, the Volf huffed and stepped back. Then, without a sound, the 3 wolves vanished into the shadows as quickly as they had appeared. Eli let out a long, shaky breath. I thought they were going to eat me?" Kaelith continued walking. "They would have," he said simply, "if you were alone. But everything that moves in darkness respects the power of the Vampire King." They continued through the forest until they reached a steep cliff overlooking the distant human lands. Torches flickered far below, too many to belong to a normal village. Kaelith's eyes narrowed. "They are preparing for something," he murmured. "Your mother is the bait, but we do not yet know the trap." Eli stepped closer to the edge, staring down. "I don't care about traps," he said softly. I just want my mom back." Kaelith looked at him for a long moment, a strange warmth flickering in his expression. "You have your mother's courage," he said. "But courage alone will not save her." He touched the stone wall beside them, and shadows peeled away like black smoke, forming a narrow doorway. "We take the shadow paths," he said. Eli hesitated only a moment before stepping inside. The world twisted, stretched, and folded, and suddenly they reappeared deep in another part of the forest, much closer to the human lands. But something was wrong. Kaelith's eyes sharpened. The air smelled of silver burning, poisonous to vampires. Eli noticed the tension in the king's jaw. "Are you hurt?" he whispered. "No," Kaelith replied, though his voice was tight. "But silver means Inquisitors are nearby. They hunt anything they fear, and they fear everything they cannot control." They moved silently through the thick trees until the flickering outline of a stone fortress appeared in the distance. Eli's breath caught in his throat. That's where they took her," he said, pointing toward the building where dim torchlight illuminated the walls. Even from far away, Kaelith could hear faint cries shouting, metal striking stone, footsteps marching. And beneath it all, he heard a single heartbeat he recognized. Myra's, weak, hurting, but alive. The blood oath pulled sharply at his core, as if tugging him forward. He clenched his jaw. "She is inside," he said quietly. "And she is suffering." Eli looked up, hope and fear tangled in his eyes. "Then let's go." But Kaelith did not move. Instead, he placed a hand on Eli's shoulder. "Listen to me carefully," he said. "If the Inquisitors wanted only your mother, they would not have used glowing chains. They are expecting me? They want to end the vampire line once and for all. This is not a rescue. This is a war trap." Eli bit his lip, tears filling his eyes. "But she's my mom. Please, I can't lose her." Kaelith knelt to look him in the eyes. It was the first time he had lowered himself to anyone in centuries. "You will not lose her," he said firmly. "Not as long as I walk this earth, but you must do exactly as I say. If you run, they will take you too. If you shout, they will kill her to weaken me. You must be silent and invisible until I tell you otherwise." Eli nodded quickly, wiping his eyes. "I promise." Kaelith rose to his full height, his cloak shifting with the wind. His eyes glowed brighter now, the red turning sharper, colder. "You stay in the trees," he instructed. "If danger comes, hide. Your mother would want you safe, even if she is not." Eli swallowed hard but nodded again. Kaelith placed one cold hand on Eli's head for a brief moment, almost a blessing, and then disappeared into the shadows without a sound. The forest remained quiet for a moment before Eli crept closer to the edge of the clearing. From there he could see the fortress clearly. The Inquisitors walked back and forth with torches, wearing armor marked with the red burning eye symbol. Eli's stomach twisted at the sight. These were the men who had dragged his mother away while she screamed for him to run. Hearing her voice again, her desperate cries, Eli felt tears spill down his cheeks. But he stayed silent, just like Kaelith told him. Suddenly, a sharp horn blasted through the night. The torches on the wall flared brighter. The Inquisitors started shouting commands. Eli panicked. Had they seen Kaelith already? But then something else happened. Every torch flame began to bend, pulled by some unseen force. The wind shifted violently. And then the shadows themselves began to move, Eli gasped. A tall, dark figure stepped out of the blackness behind the fortress gates. King Kaelith had arrived, and the night itself seemed to rise with him, a heavy. Silence fell over the fortress yard as King Kaelith emerged from the shadows. Tall and terrifying, his cloak swirling behind him like living smoke. The torches flickered wildly, bending toward him as if pulled by an invisible force. Every Inquisitor on the walls froze, their armor rattling as fear cut through their discipline. Eli watched from the trees, his heart pounding so loudly he worried they would hear it. The king stood alone in the moonless clearing, yet he looked like an entire army in ancient power wrapped in the shape of a man. One Inquisitor stepped forward, gripping a glowing silver spear. "You are surrounded, Vampire King," he shouted, though his voice trembled. "This time you will not escape." Kaelith tilted his head slightly, as if amused. "I did not come to escape," he replied in a calm, cold tone. "I came for the woman you stole." His voice echoed through the air like thunder, making the men flinch. "Bring me Myra of Hollowbrook," he continued. and I will grant you one chance to live." Laughter erupted from the fortress walls, nervous, mocking, desperate laughter. "You think we fear you?" Another Inquisitor yelled. "We have. Prepared for your kind for decades?" The man slammed the butt of his torch onto the wall, and suddenly the entire fortress lit up with bright white rune silver-blessed symbols carved into stone. The ground trembled as lines of glowing silver wrapped around the walls like chains. Eli felt a burning sensation even from afar, as if the air itself was becoming poisonous. Kaelith's expression did not change, but Eli noticed the faint twitch of pain along the king's jawline. Silver was lethal to vampires, and now it surrounded the fortress like a trap waiting to snap shut. "You believe silver will save you?" Kaelith said, lifting one hand. "That is the arrogance of men. You forget the old laws." The torches bent again, flames stretching toward him unnaturally. The Inquisitors shouted in confusion, their lines breaking. Then the fortress shook as a massive shadow rose behind Kaelith, tall, clawed, ancient. A shadow guardian summoned from the deepest part of the king's magic. Even Eli, watching from a distance, felt the tremor of fear move through the forest. The Inquisitors panicked. One screamed, "Activate the inner chains!" Inside the fortress, metal screeched and clanked. Eli's eyes widened in horror as glowing chains were pulled tighter inside the building chains meant to restrain his mother. Through a small window, dim and far away, he saw her silhouette jerk painfully as the chains tightened around her wrists. He covered his mouth to stop himself from shouting. The blood oath struck Kaelith's core sharply. He felt Myra's pain as if knives were digging into his own flesh. His eyes blazed red, brighter than ever before. "Enough," he growled. With a powerful sweep of his hand, shadows slammed against the silver runes. The symbols flickered, dimmed, and then burst apart in showers of sparks. The line of Inquisitors guarding the wall screamed as darkness swarmed toward them like a living storm. But the commander of the fortress, a tall man clad in silver-lined armor, stepped forward and thrust a staff into the ground. A blinding explosion of light erupted outward, forcing even Kaelith to shield his eyes. The Shadow Guardian dissolved instantly. Eli gasped. He had never seen Kaelith take a step back, not even once until now. The commander smirked cruelly. "Did you think we would not prepare for your tricks? The old books warned us about your shadow beasts." Kaelith recovered quickly, lowering his hand. "You torture a defenseless woman," he said coldly. "And you boast as if it grants you honor?" The commander raised the glowing staff again. "She is no ordinary woman," he said. "She is the key to bringing you out of hiding. And when you fall, the vampire race will follow." He pointed the staff toward the small window where Myra hung in chains. "Her suffering weakens you, doesn't it?" Kaelith's eyes darkened. Eli saw something he had never imagined possible, pure, ancient rage flashing in the king's gaze. Without another word, Kaelith thrust his hand forward. The shadows at his feet exploded outward, sweeping across the ground like black fire. The fortress walls shook violently as cracks raced up their surface. Inquisitors tumbled from their posts, screaming as the darkness tore through their defenses. Eli hugged the tree trunk, trembling but unable to look away. But then something else happened. Something worse. The commander slammed his glowing staff onto the ground again, and this time the fortress gates opened not inward but outward. A swarm of armored Inquisitors poured out, carrying long silver chains that glowed with holy energy. They surrounded Kaelith in a wide circle, chanting in a language Eli didn't recognize. The symbols on the chains grew brighter and brighter until Eli's eyes hurt from looking at them. Kaelith tried to move, but the chains crackled and tightened around him from all sides, forming a cage of light. Smoke rose from his skin where the silver got too close. For the first time, Eli saw the king struggle. "Break the circle," Kaelith commanded, his voice strained. But the Inquisitors chanted louder. The silver cage shrank, inch by inch. Kaelith fell to one knee, his eyes burning with pain and fury. Eli covered his mouth to keep from shouting. If he made any noise, they might find him and use him against Kaelith. The commander approached the kneeling king with a triumphant smile. "You should never have left your citadel," he said. We know what binds you. Your life is tied to the woman inside. Her suffering weakens you. Her death will end you. Eli's heart stopped. The commander lifted the glowing staff toward the fortress window toward Myra. No, Eli whispered, tears streaming down his face. No, please. Kaelith's head snapped upward despite the chains burning into him. Eli, he shouted. Stay hidden? But the boy could no longer stay still. He ran from the trees, tears blurring his vision, stumbling across the clearing toward the fortress. Stop hurting my mom, he screamed. Every Inquisitor turned. The commander's cruel smile widened. Perfect, he said. The boy lives. Now the oath's chain grows even tighter around the king's throat. Eli froze as soldiers surrounded him. But before they could grab him, a sudden cold wind blasted through the clearing, and the temperature dropped so sharply that frost formed on the ground beneath his feet. Kaelith slowly rose to his full height inside the shrinking cage, his eyes blazing bright crimson once more. Even in pain, even trapped, an ancient power surged around him like a storm returning to life. You made a mistake, Kaelith said, his voice low and deadly. You threatened what is mine to protect. The silver cage flickered dot, and for the first time, the Inquisitors realized the Vampire King was not defeated. He was waking up. Asterisk the moment Eli stepped into the clearing. Everything changed. The Inquisitors, who moments earlier believed they had complete control, now saw the trembling boy and understood. They had just tightened the noose of the blood oath around the Vampire King. Eli stood alone in the moonlit yard, surrounded by armored men clutching glowing silver chains, but he did not back away. His small fists were clenched and tears streamed down his face, but his voice, though shaking, rose clearly into the cold night air. Stop hurting my mom, he cried. Something inside Kaelith snapped at those words. The silver cage surrounding him tightened instantly, responding to the Inquisitor's chanting, burning deeper into his skin. Smoke rose where the chains touched him, and his knees nearly buckled, but his eyes, bright crimson, never left the boy. The commander chuckled, lifting his staff toward Eli. Bring the child, he ordered. The king will break faster when his oath is pulled from both ends. Soldiers obeyed immediately, moving toward Eli, but they stopped halfway when a thunderous crack shook the earth. The silver cage flickered violently as a dark shockwave burst from Kaelith's body. Knocking several men off their feet, Kaelith rose slowly, painfully, but with a terrifying steadiness. Do not touch him, he growled, each word vibrating the ground. The chains responded by burning hotter, glowing brighter, but the king stood tall. His dark hair lifted as if caught in a rising wind. The very air around him grew heavy with an ancient force one not seen in centuries. The commander tightened his grip on the staff. He should not be standing, he muttered. Increase the chant. The Inquisitors shouted louder, and the silver cage shrank rapidly, trying to crush him into submission. Kaelith staggered as sparks exploded across his arms and chest, but he refused to kneel. The blood oath was dragging at his heart so violently now that he felt Myra's pain with every breath she took, her wrists torn raw by chains, her body weakened, her heartbeat fading. And now Eli, the son she had protected, stood in the hands of her captors. The oath twisted inside him like burning iron. Vampires were not meant to feel pain this way. Not physical pain, not emotional pain, but the oath Myra created decades ago had been no ordinary magic. It had been born from sacrifice, fearlessness, and the belief that even a creature of the night had honor. That bond was now awakened fully in Kaelith. Felt it ignite every ancient part of him. Eli stumbled backward as the soldiers approached again. He wanted to be brave like his mother told him to be, but the fear was too big, the chains too bright, the men too cruel. Still, he did not run. Not while his mother was suffering inside. Not while Kaelith was fighting because of him. Leave him alone, Eli cried again, voice cracking. Something sharp echoed inside the fortress metal striking stone, followed by a hoarse cry. Kaelith felt it instantly. Myra. His head snapped toward the fortress wall. The commander grinned. She cannot hold out much longer, he said. You are tied to her, aren't you? Her pain is your pain. And when she dies, Kaelith's roar shook the trees. The silver cage shattered outward in a violent explosion of black smoke and red sparks. Inquisitors flew across the yard like broken dolls, weapons scattering from their hands. The commander stumbled backward, his staff flickering uncertainly. "Impossible," he whispered. Kaelith stepped forward, the ground cracking beneath his feet. His eyes glowed like burning stars, brighter than any torch flame, and shadows wrapped around his arms like armor. He was breathing heavily, but his power surged with a deadly, ancient force. "You made one fatal mistake," Kaelith said, advancing slowly. "You threatened a mother and her child." With a sweep of his arm, shadows burst across the yard, knocking soldiers aside. Chains melted in the presence of his fury, dripping silver onto the ground like molten metal. The commander raised his staff in panic, smashing it into the earth. A dome of bright white light erupted around him, forcing Kaelith back slightly. "Stay away, monster!" he shouted. Eli, who had been pushed aside during the chaos, crawled to his feet. He could barely see through the smoke and flashing light, but he saw Kaelith's body tremble. The king was stronger than anyone Eli had ever imagined, but even he could not hold off magic designed to weaken him. Eli wiped his face, sniffled, and did the only thing he could think of. He ran toward Kaelith. "Eli, no!" Kaelith warned, but the boy ignored him. He grabbed Kaelith's arm and held on tight. His small touch was warm against the king's cold skin. The blood oath surged inside Kaelith again, but this time, instead of pain, something new rose with its strength. Eli's voice was small but steady. "My mom said, 'You're the strongest creature in the world,'" he whispered. "She said you'd protect us. Please, don't let them win." Those words, simple words spoken by a frightened child, did something to Kaelith no weapon ever could. They reminded him of who he used to be, of the promise he made to a brave human woman who saved him without expecting anything in return. He bent slightly, placing a cold hand on the top of Eli's head. "I will not fail her," he said softly. "Or you?" He straightened again, his eyes burning brighter. The white dome pulsed violently, threatening to explode outward. The commander's face twisted in panic as cracks spider-webbed across the glowing shield. "Stay back!" The commander yelled, but his voice shook. Kaelith took a step forward, then another. Shadows coiled around his feet like smoke turning into storms. The air heated with dark energy. The commander thrust his staff forward in desperation, sending a beam of silver light at the king. Kaelith raised one hand, and the light struck his palm butt instead of burning him. It bent around him like water striking stone. The commander's face went white. No, this is not possible." Kaelith lowered his hand. "You tortured a woman who saved me," he said. "You hunted an innocent child. You have earned what comes next." With a single step, he crossed into the ring of light. The dome cracked apart, shattering like glass under the force of his presence. The commander stumbled back, falling to the ground. Soldiers screamed and fled as shadows swarmed around them. The fortress door blew open from the inside, as if responding to the king's fury, and for the first time, Eli saw the dark, winding staircase that led to the dungeon where his mother was kept. Kaelith glanced at him. "Stay behind me," he said. "Your mother awaits." Eli nodded fiercely. Together they stepped into the fortress. Torches went out as they passed. The air grew colder, darker. And far below, in the deepest cell, Myra lifted her head weakly, her fading heart suddenly beating faster. She could feel him coming. The fortress corridors twisted like a maze carved from stone and fear. But King Kaelith walked through them without hesitation. Guided by the invisible pull of the blood oath that tied him to Myra, Eli clung to his cloak as they descended deeper into the earth. The torches flickering violently as if afraid to stay lit in the king's presence. Every step echoed through the narrow halls, mixing with the distant clanking of chains and muffled cries. Eli's heart raced faster with every turn they took. He had always known his mother was strong, but imagining her suffering in a place like this made his stomach twist painfully. Kaelith's expression remained carved from ice, but inside his chest a storm brewed. Each whisper of Myra's pain struck him like a blade. Her heartbeat was faint, fragile, slipping farther away with every second. He could feel her life fading, the bond pulling at him so fiercely it felt like his own breath was being stolen. "We are close," Kaelith murmured, his voice low and edged with tension. Eli tightened his grip on the king's cloak, afraid of what they might find as they reached the lowest level of the fortress. The air grew colder and the smell of damp stone filled the hallway. A line of dungeon doors stretched ahead, each marked with cruel symbols meant to suppress supernatural strength. But one door pulsed faintly with red light, the magic of the blood oath reacting to Myra's suffering. Kaelith reached it in 3 strides. Eli stood beside him, trembling. Is she behind that door?" he whispered. Kaelith placed a hand on the cold metal. "Yes," the oath surged through him in agreement, twisting with urgency. Without wasting another moment, Kaelith pressed his palm flat against the door. Shadows snaked from his fingers, sliding over the metal like black fire. The glowing symbols tried to resist, flashing brightly, but the king's magic overwhelmed them. The door began to melt, dripping like candle wax. Eli stepped back as the dungeon filled with a low, humming sound magic breaking magic. When the door finally collapsed inward, Eli rushed inside before Kaelith could stop him. "Mom!" he cried. Myra hung from chains anchored to the ceiling and floor, her wrists and ankles bound by glowing metal infused with silver. Her head was bowed, her breathing shallow, her hair tangled and falling around her bruised face. But when she heard Eli's voice, her son's voice, her eyes fluttered open. Eli?" she whispered. The boy ran toward her, but the chains sparked with dangerous light. Kaelith caught him just in time, pulling him back. "The chains will kill you," the king warned gently, kneeling beside him. Eli's eyes filled with tears. "Please, save her. You promised." Kaelith lifted his gaze to Myra, and for a moment, centuries of walls he had built around his heart cracked. She looked almost exactly as she had decades ago, brave even in suffering, stubborn in her refusal to break. She had saved his life once, risking everything for a creature the world feared. Now it was his turn to repay that courage. He rose to his full height, his eyes burning deep crimson. "Myra," he said softly, "I am here." Her gaze sharpened with recognition, despite her pain. "You kept your promise," she whispered, a faint smile forming even as tears filled her eyes. "I knew you would." Eli grabbed Kaelith's arm again, desperate. "Help her, please." Kaelith stepped forward and gripped the glowing chains. Instantly, smoke rose from his skin as the silver burned into his palms. Eli gasped. "Stop! It's hurting you." Kaelith didn't let go. "I am bound to her life," he said. "Her suffering is my suffering. Her freedom is my duty." With a roar that shook the room, he pulled. The chains trembled violently, resisting him. Sparks burst outward, burning the stone walls. The symbols around the room flickered and shattered as the king dragged the chains apart, inch by inch. The silver cut into his hands, burning holes in his skin. Blood dripped to the floor. But he did not stop. Eli watched in awe as shadows surged around the king, lifting him with their strength. With one final, brutal pull, the chains snapped. Myra collapsed forward, but Kaelith caught her before she hit the ground. His arms cold and strong held her gently. "I've got you," he said, his voice softer than Eli had ever heard it. Myra blinked slowly, her energy nearly gone. "My son," she whispered. "Is he safe, Mom?" Eli threw his arms around her, careful of her injuries. "I'm here. I'm okay." Myra's trembling hand lifted to touch his cheek. "Thank God, she breathed. Kaelith helped lower her to the floor, removing the last of the broken chains. But as he did, the blood oath surged again, this time with a warning. Something was coming. Something powerful. Heavy footsteps echoed down the hall. Eli's head snapped toward the entrance. "They're coming," he whispered in fear. Kaelith stood protectively in front of Myra and Eli, his eyes darkening with deadly calm. A squad of Inquisitors stormed into the dungeon, weapons drawn, glowing chains ready. The commander stepped forward, fury in his eyes. "We finally have you cornered, Vampire King," he spat. "You and that cursed woman." Kaelith's voice was ice. "Touch them, and you will not live long enough to regret it." The commander smirked. "You cannot fight us while protecting them." Kaelith smiled, a slow, terrifying smile that made even the torches dim. "Who said I would be fighting alone?" The ground trembled. From the dripping shadows of the dungeon walls, shapes began to emerge, wolves made of darkness, skeletal bats with glowing eyes, spectral hunters older than human history. The creatures bowed their heads toward Kaelith. Eli's eyes went wide. Are those—" "The Nightburn," Kaelith answered. "Creatures of shadow, bound to the Vampire King's command." The commander faltered as the creatures filled the room. "Impossible. We sealed the wards. You sealed nothing," Kaelith snapped. "Your chains broke the moment you touched what is mine to protect." The air exploded into chaos. The Nightburn lunged at the Inquisitors, shadows tearing through armored lines. The Inquisitors shouted commands, but fear had already broken their formation. Eli shielded his mother while Kaelith stood before them like a living fortress, striking down anyone who came near. When the battle paused for a moment, Myra reached toward Kaelith weakly. "Why? Did you come?" she whispered. His eyes softened. "Because you saved me when no one else would, and because honor does not fade with time." Myra's breath trembled. "Kaelith, we have to get Eli out." "We will," he promised. "I will take you both home." But before he could move her, a thunderous alarm echoed through the fortress. More footsteps. More soldiers. Worse, something massive and ancient stirred above them. The final trap was awakening. Kaelith's eyes narrowed. They were not trying to kill us, he realized. They were trying to delay me. Eli clutched his mother tighter. "What does that mean?" Kaelith looked toward the ceiling where dust fell with each new tremor. "It means the true monster of this fortress is coming." A deep rumble echoed through the stone walls as Kaelith lifted Myra gently into his arms, signaling Eli to stay close behind him. The dungeon ceiling shook again, dust raining down, like gray snow followed by a low growl that seemed to vibrate through the bones of the fortress itself. Eli clutched his mother's hand, eyes wide with fear. "What is that sound?" he whispered. Kaelith's crimson eyes flicked upward, darkening. "The Inquisitors were never foolish enough to rely only on chains and soldiers," he said. "They have awakened something older than their order, something even vampires avoid." Another roar thundered overhead, so powerful it shook loose chunks of stone from the walls. Myra winced in Kaelith's arms, her voice weak. "Kaelith, please get Eli out of here." "Don't worry about me," Kaelith's jaw tightened. "I am worried about you," he said quietly, surprising even himself with the softness in his voice, "and I will not leave either of you behind." The hallway outside the cell flooded suddenly with torchlight as more Inquisitors advanced, shouting orders. But before they could reach the dungeon, a shadowy beast crashed through the upper floor, its massive claws breaking stone as if it were sand. Eli screamed and stepped back, gripping Kaelith's cloak. The creature lowered its head through the hole in the ceiling, glowing red eyes glaring down at them. Its body was enormous, covered in armored scales etched with ancient runes. A creature half forgotten by history, a gloomdrake bred centuries ago to hunt supernatural beings. The Inquisitors cheered as the monster roared, shaking the entire fortress. "It's over, Vampire," the commander shouted. "No power of darkness can defeat our gloomdrake." Kaelith stared up at the creature with a calm, freezing anger. "You have lost all sense," he said, "to awaken a gloomdrake in enclosed walls. You doom yourselves before you doom us." "Kill them!" The commander screamed. The gloomdrake lunged downward, its massive jaws snapping. Kaelith leapt backward with inhuman speed, shielding Myra and Eli as stone shattered behind him. The monster roared again, its breath thick with poison. Kaelith pushed Eli behind him. "Stay close to your mother," he commanded. With Myra still in his arms, he summoned his shadows. Thick black smoke spiraled up around him, transforming into dark tendrils that lashed at the beast. The Gloomdrake recoiled, but it did not fall. Its armor deflected most of the attacks. It was too strong even for shadow magic alone. The commander laughed triumphantly. You cannot defeat it, your shadows are useless. Kaelith ignored him, his mind raced. Shadows could not break armored runes. Silver could, but silver burned him. Fire could, but not in a place without light. Then he felt it, a faint warmth against his chest. Myra's hand resting weakly over the place where the blood oath had awakened. Her breath was shallow, but her voice trembled with certainty. Kaelith, she whispered, you need light to kill a Gloomdrake, not shadow. Light, he echoed. I have no such, but she smiled faintly. Yes, you do. The oath binds more than darkness. It binds life. Eli looked between them, confused. What does that mean? Kaelith finally understood. The blood pact between him and Myra had not only tied their pain together. It tied their strength, her human warmth, her courage to his ancient power. If he unlocked it, he could channel something vampires were never meant to wield, light. The Gloomdrake lunged again. Kaelith held Myra close and whispered an incantation in the old tongue of vow spoken only once in history, the night she saved him. Myra reached up weakly and touched his cheek. I trust you, she whispered. The oath flared alive between them. Kaelith felt a rush of burning heat fill his chest, not pain, but energy, bright and fierce. His shadows dissolved into glowing red-white flame. Eli stumbled back in awe. Mom, he's glowing. The Gloomdrake reared back, sensing the coming threat. Kaelith slowly lifted one hand, fire gathering in his palm like a newborn star. Ancient creature, he said, his voice echoing with layered power. Face the light of a promise kept. He hurled the glowing sphere upward. The dungeon exploded with a burst of red-white radiance. The Gloomdrake shrieked, its armored runes melting as holy light met shadow flesh. The monster fell backward, crashing through the upper floors, its roars echoing in agony. Eli shielded his eyes, shaking as the fortress trembled violently. The king's fire burned through the Gloomdrake, reducing the centuries-old beast to ash. When the light finally dimmed, only smoke and silence remained. The Inquisitors stared in disbelief, their faces pale with terror. He used light? One whispered. That's impossible. Vampires cannot. They can, Kaelith said coldly, stepping out of the dungeon smoke. When a human heart lends them strength. Panic erupted. Soldiers dropped weapons and fled through crumbling hallways. The commander backed away, trembling. You have become a monster beyond monsters. No, Kaelith replied. I became what a promise required. The commander swung his staff desperately, but before he could strike, a shadow Volf leapt from the darkness, knocking him flat. Kaelith did not kill him. He simply stepped past him, carrying Myra as Eli rushed by his side. Mom, are you okay? Eli cried, brushing her hair from her face. Myra managed a soft smile. I am now, because you came for me. Eli hugged her tightly, tears streaming down his cheeks. Kaelith looked at them both with a strange expression, half relief, half wonder. We must leave before the fortress collapses, he said. Stay behind me. He led them back through the crumbling hallways, the night burn clearing their path. When they reached the open forest at last, the sky was beginning to lighten with the first hint of dawn. Kaelith carried Myra to a fallen log and gently set her down. You need rest, he said softly. Myra looked up at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. I knew you would come, she whispered. Even after all these years, Kaelith lowered his gaze, I owed you my life. But what I did tonight was not just obligation. Eli sat beside his mother, hugging her tightly. Thank you, he said to Kaelith, his voice small but sincere. You saved us. Kaelith knelt before Eli, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. You showed great courage, he said. Your mother raised a brave son. Eli's face brightened with pride. Myra watched Kaelith quietly, a softness in her eyes. What happens now? She asked. The king rose slowly. Now, he said, you return to your village, and anyone who dares harm you again will answer to the Vampire King. Myra smiled weakly. And you? She whispered. Kaelith looked. toward the rising sun, the first rays touching his cloak without burning him, a lingering gift of the blood oath. "I will watch over you both," he said, not from obligation, but from choice. Eli took his mother's hand. Kaelith turned away, his cloak drifting behind him like a shadow blessed by dawn. And somewhere deep inside, for the first time in centuries, he did not feel alone. He felt human.